I still remember the exact moment I realized the greatest thief in my family wasn't a stranger, it was someone who called me Dad. The day I opened my late wife's jewelry box, my hands started shaking. It was empty. Not one necklace. Not one bracelet. Not even the wedding ring Margaret had begged me to protect before cancer took her from me. When I asked where everything had gone, my daughter-in-law looked me straight in the eyes and smiled. I sold it. She said it as casually as if she'd borrowed a cup of sugar. But what she didn't know, hidden inside one ordinary-looking gold locket was something worth far more than all the jewelry combined. And by the time she realized what she'd thrown away, her entire life was already falling apart. For most of my 68 years, I believed hard work solved everything. I worked 39 years as a mechanical engineer, often taking double shifts just so my family would never struggle the way Margaret and I had when we were young. Margaret used to laugh whenever I skipped buying myself new clothes. "You'll wear those trousers until they become transparent." "They're still good," I'd reply. She would roll her eyes before secretly buying me another pair anyway. She balanced me. She softened every sharp corner in my life. When she passed away 3 years ago, the house became unbearably quiet. Every room reminded me of her. Her favorite teacup still sat beside the kettle. Her gardening gloves still hung by the back door. Some mornings I'd catch myself calling her name before remembering she wasn't coming back. The only thing I couldn't bear to move was her jewelry box. Inside were pieces collected over 40 years of marriage. Some expensive, some worthless. But every single one carried a memory. Our 10th anniversary necklace. The pearl earrings she wore when our son Daniel graduated. The silver bracelet our granddaughter made fun of because it looked old-fashioned. None of them were simply jewelry. They were pieces of Margaret. Daniel never understood that. "Dad," he often said, "they're just objects." "No," I'd answer quietly. "They're memories." Unfortunately, my opinion mattered less and less after Margaret died. Daniel had married Ashley 5 years earlier. Ashley always appeared sweet around strangers. In public she called me Dad with the warmest smile imaginable. Behind closed doors, she treated me like inconvenient furniture. If I watched television, she'd change the channel without asking. If I cooked dinner, she criticized everything. Too much salt. Too dry. Who still cooks like this? Daniel never defended me. Instead he'd sigh. "Dad, just ignore her." Ignore her? It was my own house. After Margaret's death, Daniel insisted moving in would help me cope. "I don't want you living alone." At first I believed him. But slowly, the house stopped feeling like mine. Ashley redecorated without asking. Margaret's paintings disappeared. Family photographs vanished from the walls. Even Margaret's favorite armchair somehow ended up in the garage because Ashley claimed it made the living room look depressing. Every objection I raised ended the same way. "Dad, you're being difficult. You need to move on. You can't live in the past forever." Funny. They expected me to move on while they enjoyed living rent-free in the home Margaret and I spent 40 years paying for. Then came the excuses about money. Ashley always had another financial emergency. Credit cards. Designer handbags. Luxury holidays. A new car they couldn't afford. Daniel worked hard, but no salary could satisfy Ashley's spending. One evening I overheard them arguing upstairs. "We're drowning." Ashley shouted. "I told you not to buy another designer bag." "I needed it." "You already have 15. I can't show up carrying last year's collection." I quietly closed my bedroom door. The next morning Ashley acted as though nothing had happened. Until she knocked gently on my study. "Dad." "Yes." "I was wondering." She hesitated just long enough to sound embarrassed. "Could you lend us 20,000 pounds? I nearly dropped my reading glasses. 20,000? It's only temporary. I don't have 20,000 lying around." She smiled. "You own this house outright." I stared at her. "So, you could remortgage." I laughed because I genuinely thought she was joking. She wasn't. Later that evening Daniel joined her. "Dad, maybe Ashley has a point." I looked at my own son. You want me to borrow against the house your mother and I spent decades paying off. To clear Ashley's shopping debts? There are debts now. No. Ashley slammed her cup onto the table. You always loved money more than family. That sentence hit harder than she realized. Margaret and I had sacrificed holidays, new furniture and countless luxuries so Daniel could attend university without student loans. Loved money? I loved protecting what we'd built. The atmosphere inside the house changed overnight. Ashley stopped speaking to me unless necessary. Meals became uncomfortable. Daniel barely looked at me. Then came the emotional manipulation. Ashley suddenly announced she was pregnant. Everyone celebrated. Even I did. Until she cornered me one afternoon. Dad. Congratulations again. She smiled. Thank you. Then her expression changed. A baby needs stability. I agree. We're thinking the house should officially be transferred into Daniel's name. I blinked. What? It'll make inheritance easier. I'm not dead. She laughed. Of course not. But I noticed Daniel avoiding eye contact. He knew exactly what she was doing. Weeks passed. The pressure increased. Daniel began bringing paperwork home. Estate planning. Ownership transfers. Tax benefits. Every conversation somehow ended with me signing something. One evening Daniel finally lost patience. Dad, why are you making this so difficult? Because this house belongs to me. It'll belong to me eventually anyway. Eventually. Ashley folded her arms. What if you need care one day? I'll manage. Or maybe a nursing home. There was the threat hidden beneath the kindness. If I refused, I would become the burden. That night I couldn't sleep. I walked into Margaret's old sewing room and sat quietly holding her photograph. I miss you, I whispered. I don't know how much longer I can fight them. The following morning something unexpected happened. Margaret's solicitor called. Mr. Harrison? Speaking. I've been reviewing your late wife's estate documents. Yes. There appears to be something we never discussed. I frowned. What do you mean? I'm afraid it's not something I can explain over the phone. When can you come in? Tomorrow morning. After hanging up, I felt something strange. I had no idea that meeting would uncover a secret Margaret had protected for decades. A secret hidden inside the very jewelry Ashley had been staring at for months. And before the week was over, someone in my own house would decide those precious memories were worth nothing more than quick cash. The next morning I drove to my late wife's solicitor's office with 1,000 questions racing through my mind. Margaret had always handled the paperwork. She used to joke that I could rebuild an engine but would get lost reading a single page of legal documents. As I walked into the familiar office, Mr. Peterson greeted me with a warm but serious smile. Arthur, he said, shaking my hand. I'm glad you came. What is this about? I asked. You said there was something Margaret never told me. He opened a thick folder and carefully removed a yellow envelope with my wife's handwriting on it. Seeing her neat cursive nearly brought me to tears. This was left with instructions to be opened only if something happened to her jewelry collection, he explained. My heart skipped. The jewelry? He nodded. Margaret insisted this envelope remain sealed unless the collection was lost, stolen, or sold. I stared at the envelope for several long seconds before slowly opening it. Inside was a handwritten letter. My dearest Arthur, if you're reading this, then someone has ignored my final wish and taken the jewelry without permission. Don't blame yourself. I suspected this day might come. That's why I hid something much more valuable than gold. My hands began trembling. Mr. Peterson quietly slid another document across the desk. This accompanies the letter. It was a certificate for a private safety deposit box. Margaret had rented it nearly 25 years earlier. What is inside? I whispered. He smiled gently. Only your wife knew. But according to her instructions, you are now the sole owner. An hour later, we arrived at the bank. The manager unlocked the small vault and placed a heavy metal box on the table before leaving us alone. I lifted the lid. Inside wasn't piles of jewelry. Instead, I found stacks of documents, several sealed envelopes, a small velvet pouch, and an old gold locket. The same locket Ashley had always called cheap. Inside the pouch was a tiny key. Inside the envelopes were investment certificates. Mr. Peterson adjusted his glasses as he examined them. My goodness! What is it? Arthur and Margaret invested in a small technology company almost 30 years ago. So, that company became one of the largest engineering firms in Europe. I frowned. I don't understand. He slowly calculated the current value. These shares are now worth over £4 million. I could barely breathe. £4 million. And according to these documents, no one knew because she kept the investments completely separate from the family finances. Tears filled my eyes. Margaret had quietly built a fortune without ever changing the simple life we shared. Then I noticed another letter. It was addressed directly to me. If Daniel ever values money more than family, promise me you won't reward greed. Wealth should go to those who understand loyalty, kindness, and honesty, not entitlement. I closed my eyes. For the first time since losing Margaret, I felt as though she was sitting beside me. Meanwhile, back at home, Ashley was carrying out plans of her own. When I returned, the house felt strangely quiet. No one greeted me. As I walked upstairs, I noticed my bedroom door wasn't fully closed. Someone had been inside. Nothing looked disturbed. At least, not immediately. That evening I went to make tea and found Ashley unusually cheerful. Good day, she asked. It was. I'm glad. Daniel looked nervous throughout dinner. He barely touched his food. 3 days later, I decided to visit Margaret's jeweler box. I wanted to look at it one last time before moving everything to the bank. When I opened the drawer, my heart sank. The box was gone. I searched every cupboard, every shelf, every wardrobe. Nothing. I walked downstairs. Daniel. He looked up from his phone. Yes. Where's your mother's jewelry box? He frowned. I haven't seen it. I turned toward Ashley. She didn't even pretend to be surprised. Oh. She casually sipped her coffee. I sold it. The room fell silent. What? She shrugged. I needed the money. You had no right. It was just old jewelry. My voice cracked. That belonged to my wife. We're family, she replied coldly. Family shares. Daniel finally spoke. Ashley. What? You should have asked. I knew he'd say no. I stared at my son. And you're just sitting there? He rubbed his forehead. What's done is done. That sentence hurt more than the theft itself. I walked upstairs without another word. Inside my bedroom, I quietly called Mr. Peterson. They sold Margaret's jewelry. His tone immediately changed. Do you know where? No. Remember the letter? I froze. The letter. The locket. Ashley had no idea that hidden inside the plain gold locket was the tiny engraved number matching the safety deposit key and the legal reference proving ownership of the investment certificates. Without that information, anyone trying to sell the complete collection would attract immediate legal attention. The next morning my phone rang. It was Detective Collins. Mr. Harrison? Yes. We're investigating the attempted sale of several high-value family heirlooms. I see. The jewelry dealer became suspicious after discovering concealed identification marks inside one of the lockets. I smiled for the first time in weeks. The seller claimed everything belonged to her. It didn't. We know. By afternoon, police officers arrived at my house. Ashley opened the door confidently. Can I help you? Mrs. Harrison? Yes. We need to ask you several questions regarding stolen property. Her smile disappeared instantly. What? Neighbors slowly stepped outside. Curtains moved. Everyone watched. Daniel rushed downstairs. Officer, there must be some mistake. There isn't. Ashley tried laughing. My father-in-law gave me permission. I calmly walked forward. No, I didn't. She stared at me in disbelief. The detective held up the jeweler's report. The hidden markings inside the jewelry directly identify Mr. Arthur. Harrison as the registered owner. Ashley's face turned white. Then came the question that shattered everything. If you own the jewelry, the detective asked, why did you tell the pawnbroker you inherited it after your father-in-law had dementia? The street became completely silent. I looked at Daniel. You told people I had dementia? He couldn't answer. His silence was all the confirmation I needed. Ashley was escorted to the police car while neighbors whispered among themselves. The same neighbors she'd proudly told that I was losing my mind. Within days, the story spread throughout the community. The jewelry shop released security footage proving Ashley had lied repeatedly during the sale. Her employer suspended her pending the investigation. Friends stopped answering her calls. Daniel lost the respect of everyone who knew how faithfully Margaret and I had worked to build our life. A week later, both of them appeared at my front door carrying suitcases and tears. Dad, Daniel whispered, please, we made a terrible mistake. Ashley cried harder than I'd ever seen. I'll do anything. I looked at them calmly. For years they had mistaken kindness for weakness. Now they finally understood the difference. I forgive you, I said quietly. But forgiveness doesn't mean trust. I handed Daniel a folder. Inside were legal papers giving them 30 days to leave my home. This house belongs to Margaret and me. Neither of you earned it. A few months later, I sold the house and moved to a peaceful seaside cottage Margaret had always dreamed of owning. I used part of the investment fortune to establish the Margaret Harrison Memorial Scholarship, helping hardworking engineering students whose families couldn't afford university. Every year I meet young people who remind me of the values Margaret believed in: honesty, perseverance, and humility. As for Daniel, he eventually divorced Ashley after the debt and criminal case destroyed their marriage. He tried many times to rebuild our relationship, but trust, once shattered, takes years to repair. Sometimes people ask if I regret refusing to save them. I always smile and think of Margaret's final letter. Wealth can be replaced. Jewelry can be recovered. But character is revealed the moment people believe they can profit from your pain. In the end, I didn't lose my family because of money. They lost me because they chose greed over love. And that became the greatest price they ever paid.